They sent her beneath the castle at moonrise, not as a bride, not as a healer, not as a chosen Omega wrapped in silk and escorted with prayers, but as a punishment. Elara Vane was dragged through the black iron gates of Bloodspire Keep with her wrists bound in silver cord, her bare feet leaving small marks in the frost that had crept across the stone floor. Above her, the royal court watched from the balconies like ravens waiting for a body to fall. They all knew what waited in the dungeon below. They had heard the stories whispered across every wolf kingdom from the eastern pines to the northern cliffs, stories of the dark warlord Kale Draven, the undefeated royal Alpha, whose wolf had gone mad after the Bone Moon War. 12 Omegas had been sent into his cell to soothe the beast. 12 had screamed. None had returned. And now, the court had chosen the only girl they believed would not be mourned. A rejected, scentless Omega with no pack, no title, no wolf call strong enough to answer the moon. The guards opened the final door, and the sound that rolled out was not a growl, but something older, deeper. A terrible grinding breath that made the torches bend away from the darkness. Chains scraped. Stone cracked. Something enormous moved inside the cell. Elara's former Alpha stood above on the stair landing, his arm wrapped around the jeweled waist of the noblewoman he had chosen instead of her, and he smiled as though this death would finally erase the shame of ever being tied to a useless mate. "Let the monster decide what she is worth," he said, loud enough for the court to hear. Then they shoved Elara into the cell, and the door slammed behind her. The darkness lunged. A black wolf, the size of a warhorse, burst from the shadows, its fur bristling with silver scars, its eyes burning like twin moons drowned in blood. Every noble above drew a sharp breath, already expecting the first scream. But Elara did not scream. The wolf stopped inches from her throat. Its claws carved the stone. Its jaws trembled. For one endless moment, the entire castle held its breath. Then the beast that had killed every Omega lowered its massive head to the floor before her. The cursed wolf knelt, and beneath Elara's torn sleeve, a mark she had hidden her whole life began to glow like moonlight under skin. Before Bloodspire, before the dungeon, before the monster bowed at her feet, Elara Vane had belonged to the Ashen Veil pack, only in the way a cracked cup belonged to a royal table, tolerated until someone important noticed the flaw. She had been left at the pack gates as an infant during a winter storm, wrapped in a gray cloak with no family crest, no name stitched into the cloth, and no scent strong enough for the patrol wolves to trace her bloodline. The old midwife who raised her said the moon had been hidden that night, swallowed by clouds so thick even the temple bells sounded afraid, and from the beginning the elders called her an omen. Most Omegas carried a natural sweetness in their scent, something calming that softened the tempers of Alphas and eased the restless beasts inside their chests. Elara carried nothing. Not roses, not rain, not warm bread, not snowmelt, not any of the gentle notes people expected from her kind. When other children shifted for the first time beneath the moon and stumbled laughing through the pine needles on new paws, Elara only stood in the clearing with cold hands and a silent heart, listening to the wolves sing around her, while nothing answered inside her bones. By 13, they called her wolfless. By 16, they called her empty. By 19, they called her a mistake the moon had forgotten to finish. She worked in the lower halls of the pack fortress, mending linens, washing blood from training leathers, grinding herbs for warriors who never thanked her, and carrying trays through feasts where she was expected to keep her eyes lowered. Yet even in silence, she endured. She learned the shape of power by watching those who abused it. She learned when to speak, when to vanish, when to hold pain inside until it cooled into something sharper than grief. The only warmth she ever allowed herself was the dangerous secret that once, during the harvest moon rite, the Alpha heir Corvin Vale had looked at her as though he felt something. His wolf had stilled when she passed him in the corridor. His hand had caught her wrist. For half a breath, his eyes flashed gold, and the mate bond had trembled between them like a thread drawn from the moon itself. Elara had felt it, even without a wolf to name it, a pull so fierce it nearly brought her to her knees. Corvin felt it too. His face had gone pale. Then Lady Seraphine Thorne, daughter of the richest bloodline in Ashen Vale, stepped from the shadows and saw everything. From that night onward, Elara's life became a slow public execution. Seraphine began with whispers that Elara had bewitched Corvin, that a scentless Omega must be hiding rot beneath her skin, that no true mate bond could choose a girl with no wolf. Corvin, weak where he should have been brave, grew cruel where he should have been honest. When the mating court gathered beneath the white moon, he summoned Elara before the entire pack. She stood alone in a dress borrowed from the servants' stores, its hem too short, its sleeves patched with careful stitches, only she knew were there. The grand hall glittered with silver lamps and ancestral banners, every noble eye fixed upon her as Corvin descended from the Alpha dais with Seraphine beside him in a gown of white fur. Elara's heart beat so hard she feared the room could hear it. For one foolish instant, she thought he might confess the truth. Instead, he took the ceremonial blade, cut his palm, and let his blood fall into the moon basin while declaring, "I reject Elara Vane, who carries no scent, no wolf, no worth, and no place beside an alpha." The words struck harder than a blow. The bond inside her shuddered, not breaking cleanly, but tearing like cloth caught on a nail. Pain flashed through her ribs and she nearly fell, but she forced herself to remain standing. The court laughed softly at first, then louder when Seraphine lifted her chin and asked whether the servants should sweep away the rejected thing before supper. Elara looked at Corvin, waiting for shame, for regret, for even the smallest sign that the boy who had once touched her wrist still lived somewhere inside the Alpha air. But Corvin only looked relieved. That was the moment something strange happened. The moon basin, still dark with Corvin's blood, turned silver. The lamps flickered. Every wolf in the hall went silent at once. A cold wind passed through the chamber, though every door was sealed. Elara felt a pulse beneath her skin. Not scent, not wolf, not magic as she had been taught to fear it, but a vast, quiet opening inside her like a door beneath a frozen lake. Somewhere far away, something answered. The elders saw the basin shine and quickly covered it with black cloth. Seraphine's smile faltered. Corvin stepped back from Elara, as if she had become dangerous. By dawn, the council had declared her anomaly a stain upon the pack, and when riders arrived from Bloodspire, Keep seeking another Omega for the cursed warlord's dungeon, Corvin offered Elara before anyone else could speak. He told the royal envoy she was useless but obedient, alive but unwanted, an empty vessel that might as well be spent in service to the crown. No one objected. No one stepped forward. As they bound her wrists and led her from Ashen Vale, Elara looked back only once, not at Corvin, not at Seraphine, not at the hall where she had been humiliated, but at the moon basin covered in black cloth. Beneath the fabric, silver light still leaked through. Bloodspire Keep rose from the northern cliffs like a blade buried in the earth, its towers black against a sky heavy with storm clouds, its walls scarred by old siege fire and older magic. It was not a palace built to impress. It was a fortress built to survive the end of kingdoms. Elara arrived at dusk in a prison cart, wrapped in a cloak too thin for the mountain wind, her wrists bruised by the silver cord, her throat dry from refusing to cry where the guards could hear. The closer they came to Bloodspire, the more unnatural the silence became. No birds circled its towers, no wolves howled from the surrounding pines. Even the horses slowed before the gates, foam gathering at their mouths, as if some instinct older than training warned them not to enter. Inside, the castle moved with the controlled dread of a place pretending it was not ruled by fear. Servants walked quickly, never alone. Soldiers wore charms of bone and iron at their throats. Every doorway bore claw marks, some old and pale, some fresh enough that Elara could smell stone dust where the cuts had been made. She was taken first not to the dungeon, but to the Hall of Judgment, where the royal council waited beneath a ceiling painted with scenes of conquest. Lord Regent Maelor, gray-eyed and thin as a knife, sat in the warlord's chair, though he was careful not to touch the carved wolf heads on its arms. Beside him stood Commander Garrick, captain of Bloodspire's armies, a broad man with a handsome face and a soldier's smile that never reached his eyes. Lady Seraphine was there too, to Elara's surprise, dressed now in court silver, having ridden north with Corvin under the excuse of representing Ashen Vale in royal matters. Her gaze slid over Elara with bright satisfaction. "So this is the scentless one," Lord Maelor said, studying her as if she were an old stain on a map. "The rejected Omega." Elara kept her eyes steady. "I have a name." A ripple moved through the hall, amusement sharpened by offense. Maelor leaned forward. "Names are given by houses, bloodlines, and bonds. You have none." Corvin stood near the lower steps, refusing to meet her gaze, while Seraphine smiled from beside him, as though every humiliation were a jewel being placed into her crown. Elara should have lowered her head. Instead, something in Bloodspire's air pressed against her skin, a dark, restless pressure moving below the floor, and she found herself listening past the court, past the guards, past the wind whining through the stone. There was a heartbeat beneath the castle. Slow, enormous, broken. It struck once, and the torches guttered. It struck again, and every alpha in the hall stiffened. Maelor noticed her stillness. "You hear him." It was not a question. Elara said nothing, but her silence condemned her. The regent's eyes sharpened with interest, curious. The others wept before they reached the stair. "The others had sense," Commander Garrick muttered. "The beast hates sweetness. It drives him mad." Elara looked from one face to another and finally understood the truth none of them cared to hide. They were not sending Omegas to soothe the warlord. They were testing them, feeding them to a curse until one survived. "What happened to him?" she asked. For the first time, the hall fell truly silent. Even Seraphine looked toward the sealed doors behind the dais. Lord Maelor's voice lowered. Kale Draven won the Bone Moon War by taking into himself a curse meant to destroy every pack in the north. He saved us all, and the curse devoured his wolf in return. Now the man sleeps while the beast wakes. When the beast wakes, it kills. When it kills, the curse quiets for a time, but the quiet grows shorter. "So you send Omegas to die because you are afraid to kill your king," Elara said. The guards moved toward her, but Maelor lifted one hand. His expression held no anger, only calculation. "We send Omegas because the old laws say an alpha's madness can be gentled by the right Omega bond. If the moon has any mercy left for him, perhaps it sent us you." Elara almost laughed at the cruelty of it. The moon had never shown her mercy. It had watched her rejected, mocked, bound, and traded like a sack of grain. Yet beneath the castle, that broken heartbeat struck again, and with it came a flash of feeling not her own. Rage caged so long it had forgotten. The shape of freedom, pain buried beneath layers of command, and loneliness vast enough to swallow the world. For one terrible moment, Elara did not feel fear. She felt recognition. Then Maelor ordered the chains prepared, and the court moved like actors in a ritual they had performed too many times. They led her down through 7 iron doors, each marked with prayers carved by shaking hands. At the final stair, an old healer pressed a charm into Elara's palm without looking at her. "Do not run," the woman whispered. "Running wakes the hunt." The last door opened. Darkness breathed out, and somewhere inside it, the cursed wolf began to laugh. The cell beneath Bloodspire was not truly a cell, but a buried chamber carved into the mountain's heart, wide enough to hold a battlefield, and cold enough to preserve the dead. Silver chains as thick as tree roots ran from the walls to a central ring hammered into the floor, and every link was engraved with royal prayers, war runes and stains that no amount of scrubbing had removed. The torches burned blue here, their flames bending inward as though the darkness were drinking them. At first, Elara saw nothing but the chains. Then the shadow shifted, and the beast emerged. Kale Draven's wolf was not like the wolves of Ashen Vale. It was enormous, black as a moonless forest, with a mane of ragged fur along its spine and scars shining pale across its muzzle. Silver shackles circled its forelegs, but they had bitten deep through fur and flesh from years of struggle. Its eyes fixed on Elara with an intelligence too human to be animal and too savage to be sane. Above, behind a barred observation gallery, the council gathered to watch. Seraphine's white face appeared between two guards. Corvin stood farther back. Lord Maelor held a crystal vial in one hand, ready to record whatever change occurred in the curse. They expected Elara to tremble, to beg, to become another scream in the walls. She did tremble, but not for them. The wolf's pain entered her like winter air. It was not scent that connected them, but absence, a hollow place inside her, meeting the hollow place inside him. The beast lunged. Chains snapped tight. Stone burst beneath its claws. Elara stumbled, but did not run. Its jaws opened wide enough to close around her entire shoulder, and she saw old blood on its teeth. Then, as it reached her, the silver mark beneath her sleeve burned. The chamber went silent. Not quiet, not calm, but silent in the impossible way of snow falling over a battlefield after the last sword drops. The wolf froze. Its ears flattened. Its breath hit her face in hot gusts. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. She should have died. Instead, the beast gave a low, broken sound that was almost a whimper, lowered its head, and folded its massive front legs until its skull touched the floor before her. From the gallery came a shout. Someone dropped a lantern. Seraphine's hand flew to her mouth. Corvin swore. Lord Maelor leaned so far over the railing that the guards had to catch his sleeve. Elara did not look at them. She could not. The wolf's eyes were still burning, but beneath the red was something else, something trapped. A man looking out from inside a nightmare. Without knowing why, Elara lifted her bound hands and touched the bridge of the beast's nose. The chains went slack. The wolf closed its eyes. In that instant, the chamber changed. The frost along the walls melted in silver streaks. The blue torches turned gold, and the terrible pressure beneath the castle eased for the first time in years. Then the wolf began to shift. Bone cracked. Fur receded. The enormous body twisted inward, not violently but painfully, as though every human part of him had to fight its way back through the curse. When it was over, a man knelt where the beast had been, naked, but for the ruined black cloth at his waist. His broad shoulders scarred, his dark hair falling over a face carved by war and sleeplessness. Kale Draven opened his eyes. They were not red now, but silver-gray, fierce and exhausted. The eyes of a king who had woken in the ruins of himself. He stared at Elara's hand, still resting against his face. Then his gaze lifted to hers. No one spoke. Not the council, not the guards, not the former mate who had sent her here to die. Kale's voice, when it came, was rough as stone dragged through ash. "Who are you?" Elara should have answered with the name Maelor had tried to take from her. She should have said she was Elara Vane, rejected Omega, servant, orphan, no one. But the mark on her wrist still burned, and somewhere deep inside her, something ancient stirred awake. "I do not know," she whispered. Kale's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but recognition. Then, his hand closed gently around the silver cord, binding her wrists, and with one pull, he snapped it apart. Above them, the council erupted. Guards rushed for the stairs. Maelor shouted orders. Seraphine screamed that Elara had bewitched him. But Kale rose slowly to his full height, and even weakened, even scarred, even freshly dragged from madness, the force of his alpha presence struck the chamber like thunder. Every guard stopped. The king beneath the castle had awakened, and his first act was to place himself between the court and the girl they had meant to sacrifice. Kale Draven did not leave the dungeon that night because the curse had not left him. It had only loosened its jaws. The council wanted Elara removed at once, questioned, searched for hidden charms, perhaps burned if the old laws could be twisted quickly enough. But the moment a guard reached for her, Kale's eyes flashed red, and the wolf surged so violently beneath his skin that every torch in the chamber went blue again. Elara felt the shift before anyone else did. The rage came, like iron scraping bone, a rising storm that filled the room with death. Instinctively, she stepped closer to him. Not touching this time, not commanding, simply present. The storm hesitated. Kale drew a breath. His claws withdrew. The guards backed away. Lord Maelor saw it, and greed sharpened his expression. By dawn, the council had declared that Elara would remain at Bloodspire under royal protection, though the way they locked her in the chamber adjoining Kale's underground quarters made it clear that protection and imprisonment wore the same face here. Kale objected with a coldness that made even Commander Garrick lower his gaze, but Maelor reminded him that his wolf had killed too many for the court to trust his judgment. If she is the only thing that stills the beast, the regent said, then she must remain near the beast. Elara stood between them, hearing the truth beneath every polished word. She had escaped being sacrificed only to become a leash. That first day stretched like a fever. Kale was given clothes and chains in equal measure, black linen and silver cuffs, a king dressed as a prisoner beneath his own crown. He kept his distance from Elara, as though afraid closeness itself might become another form of hunger. When servants brought food, they left it at the door and fled. When healers entered to clean the wounds cut by the shackles, Kale refused them until Elara quietly took the basin from their trembling hands. "I am not your healer," she said, when his eyes found hers. "I know." His voice was low. "Then do not look at me as if I came here to save you." Something like pain moved across his face. "I know that too." She should have hated him for needing her. She wanted to. It would have been simpler if he were only the monster everyone feared, if his gaze were cruel, if his hands were eager to claim what the council had forced into his reach. But Kale did not touch her without permission. He did not command her to sit near him, though the curse clawed at his composure when she moved too far away. He did not call her weak, useless, empty, or any of the names that had followed her like flies since childhood. Instead, he watched her with a guarded intensity that unsettled her more than cruelty would have. On the second night, the curse rose while he slept. Elara woke to the sound of chains grinding and found Kale on his knees in the center chamber, half-shifted, his hands clawed, black fur spreading up his arms, his breath tearing from him in broken growls. The guards outside shouted but did not enter. Elara stood frozen in the doorway, fear wrapping cold fingers around her throat. Then Kale looked at her, not with the beast's hunger, but with a man's horror. "Leave," he rasped. "I cannot hold it." The door behind her was locked. The guards would not open it. The council had placed her here precisely for this moment. Survival gave her legs strength when courage did not. She crossed the chamber slowly, every step measured, remembering the old healer's warning, "Do not run." Kale shook his head, backing away until the chain stopped him. Elara. It was the first time he had said her name. It struck deeper than she expected. She knelt before him, close enough to feel the heat of the curse pouring off his skin. "Listen to me," she whispered, though she had no idea what words could reach a wolf drowning inside a man. "You are not in the war. You are not in the killing field. You are beneath Bloodspire. The door is locked. The snow is falling above us, and I am not afraid enough to run." His claws dug into the stone. "You should be." "I have been afraid my entire life," she said, and there was more truth in her voice than she meant to reveal. "It has never saved me." Kale's red eyes fixed on hers. The chamber trembled. Then the silence inside Elara opened again, deeper than before. It spread from her chest outward, not as scent, not as warmth, but as absence, so complete it swallowed the curse's screaming. Kale made a broken sound and collapsed forward, his forehead nearly touching her knees. The fur receded. His hands became human. Elara lifted them without thinking, turning them palm up to see the blood where his claws had pierced his own skin. "Why does this happen to you?" she asked. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he looked toward the wall, where old claw marks crossed older runes. Because I chose to live after doing what should have killed me. That was all he offered. It was not enough. But in Bloodspire, every answer was a door, and every door opened onto darker stairs. Days passed under the mountain, though Elara marked them only by the meals left outside the door and the changing pitch of the wind in the upper vents. Forced proximity became its own strange kingdom. Kale trained in the lower chamber each morning, shirtless despite the cold, moving through old war forms with blades dulled by council order but still dangerous in his hands. Elara pretended not to watch, but the body knows power before the mind admits fascination. He moved like someone who had once commanded armies with a glance, each strike disciplined, each turn restrained, as though every muscle had been taught to obey, even when the soul could not. Yet the curse always waited beneath the control. Sometimes his eyes reddened when a guard shouted too sharply beyond the door. Sometimes his hand shook around a cup because the scent of meat brought back the battlefield. Sometimes he stood in complete stillness for so long that Elara wondered whether the man had vanished and only the cage remained. In those moments, she learned that her silence did not merely soothe him, it gave him room to return. If she sat near the hearth with her mending, he slept for an hour. If she stood on the far side of the chamber, he slept for minutes. If she crossed into the adjoining room and closed the door, the chains began to rattle. The discovery horrified them both. "I will not be made into your cure," she told him on the 5th night, when exhaustion had sharpened her fear into anger. Kale stood by the barred window cut high into the rock, moonlight striping his face. "I did not ask you to be. No, your council did. My former pack did. Every powerful person who has ever looked at me and seen only what I can be used for." He turned then, and the restraint in him was worse than rage. "I know what it is to be used by a kingdom. You are the kingdom. I am the weapon they left breathing after the war." The words struck the room flat. Elara had no answer, and his expression told her he regretted saying even that much. Later, when the old healer came to change the bandages on Kale's wrists, Elara followed her into the corridor and demanded the truth. The woman's name was Mother Yizra, and she had served Bloodspire through 3 generations of Alphas. Her hair was white, her back bent, but her eyes were clear enough to cut through lies. "The Bone Moon War was not won by armies," Yizra said softly. "It was won by a curse redirected. The rival packs had summoned a devouring spirit, a wolf-shaped hunger meant to possess every Alpha bloodline in the north. Lord Kale took it into himself to spare them, and the council locked him away." Yizra's mouth tightened. The council feared what he became. Some feared it honestly. Some found his madness convenient. Elara thought of Lord Maelor sitting in Kale's chair. And me? Why does my presence quiet it? The healer studied her for a long moment. "Because you are not empty, child. You are sealed." The word moved through Elara like a key turning in a lock. Yizra reached for her wrist, but Elara pulled back before the old woman could touch the glowing mark she kept hidden beneath her sleeve. "Who sealed me?" "Someone who wanted you to live." Footsteps sounded beyond the turn, and Yizra stepped away at once, lowering her voice. "Do not let the council see the mark, especially not Maelor. There are bloodlines the throne buried for a reason, and some silences are not weaknesses. Some are commands." Before Elara could ask more, Commander Garrick appeared in the corridor with 2 soldiers at his back, smiling that empty soldier smile. "The regent requires the girl upstairs," he said. Yizra stiffened. "Lord Kale gave no permission." Garrick's eyes flicked toward Elara. "The warlord is not king while chained." Elara was taken to the Hall of Judgment, where Maelor waited with Seraphine, Corvin, and 3 council elders robed in black wolf fur. On the table before them sat the crystal vial Maelor had held during her first night in the dungeon. Inside it swirled silver mist. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. Elara remained silent. "This is the first peaceful breath Kale Draven has taken in 7 years, captured by witness crystal. You caused it." Seraphine stepped closer, her perfume cloying after the clean cold of the dungeon. "Or she caused the curse to change shape," she said. No, Omega has no scent. She is hiding something foul. Maelor did not rebuke her. Show us your wrist. Elara's stomach turned cold. No. Corvin finally looked at her then, and to her shock there was fear in his eyes, not guilt. He had seen the moon basin glow. He knew something was buried beneath the skin he had rejected. Elara, he said quietly, do not make this worse. The old bond scar in her chest twisted at his voice. Once, she would have obeyed for the hope of kindness. Now she looked at him and felt only the shape of a cage she had outgrown. You already made it worse, she said. Maelor's gaze hardened. He nodded to Garrick. The commander seized her arm and shoved back her sleeve. For one breath, nothing happened. Then the mark blazed silver-white across her wrist. Not a simple scar, but a crescent wrapped around a sleeping wolf's eye. Every elder recoiled. Seraphine went pale. Maelor whispered a name like a curse. Moonless blood. The council did not return Elara to Kale after they saw the mark. They locked her in an upper tower chamber, where the windows were too narrow to climb through, and the door was guarded by men who would not meet her eyes. Bloodspire changed around her in the hours that followed. Bells rang once, then were silenced. Messengers rode out through the storm. Servants whispered in corridors and stopped speaking when soldiers passed. Elara sat on the edge of the narrow bed, rubbing her thumb over the crescent mark now dim beneath her skin, and tried to gather the shattered pieces of what she had learned. Moonless blood. A sealed girl. A silence that was not emptiness, but command. She wanted to dismiss it as another superstition, another name powerful people used to justify fear, but memories rose against her will. The moon basin turning silver after Corvin's rejection, the wolves going silent when she entered the hall, Kale's cursed beast kneeling as if before something older than Alpha Law. Near midnight, the tower door opened, and Corvin slipped inside. He wore a dark cloak, his face drawn tight with panic. For a breath, Elara saw the boy she had once believed fate had chosen for her, and some wounded part of her heart flinched before hardening. You should not be here, she said. Neither should you. He glanced toward the guards beyond the door. Maelor has sent word to the outer packs. He means to convene a blood tribunal. For what crime? Existing. The honesty of it stunned her. Corvin crossed the room, lowering his voice. Elara, listen to me. The moonless bloodline was supposed to be dead. The old queens carried silence magic. They could still alpha wolves, break battle frenzy, command cursed beasts. They ruled before the current houses rose. The council will never allow one of them to stand beside Kale. Beside him? Do not pretend. You have not felt it. His jaw tightened. His wolf bowed to you. The court saw it. If Kale claims you, Maelor loses the throne he has been ruling in all but name. Seraphine loses her path to power. And he stopped. Elara looked at him coldly. You lose the comfort of believing you rejected nothing. Shame flickered across his face, but it vanished too quickly to matter. Come with me. I can get you out before dawn. Once, those words would have sounded like salvation. Now she heard the hook beneath them. And where would you take me? Corvin hesitated. Ashenvale can protect you. Elara almost smiled. It hurt too much to become laughter. Ashenvale sold me. I made a mistake. You made a choice in front of everyone. He stepped closer. I was afraid. So was I. The words stopped him. Outside, thunder rolled over the mountains. Corvin reached for her hand, and Elara pulled away. Do not touch me. His eyes flashed gold. Wounded pride, rising where remorse had failed. You think Kale is different? You think a cursed warlord knows how to love anything without destroying it? You are not his salvation, Elara. You are his leash, and when he learns that, he will hold on tighter than any of us. The cruelty worked because it struck the fear she already carried. Before she could answer, a horn sounded from the outer wall, long and low. Corvin went still. A second horn answered from beyond the valley. Then came shouting, steel, and the distant roar of wolves. The tower door burst open, and Commander Garrick entered with drawn blade. "The Ashen Vale Riders have opened the eastern gate," he said, looking not at Elara, but at Corvin. Understanding moved through the room like poison. Corvin stepped back. Elara's breath caught. "You did not come to save me." His silence was confession. Garrick smiled. "Lord Corvin came to deliver you before Maelor could use you. Rival Alpha Ronan Ash has offered a generous alliance for the moonless heir." He seized Elara by the arm. "And unlike our sentimental warlord, Ronan has no objection to collars." Elara fought then, not gracefully, not magically, but with every scrap of fury humiliation had stored inside her. She drove her elbow into Garrick's ribs, kicked at his knee, tore her sleeve against his armor, and screamed Kale's name before a gloved hand clamped over her mouth. Far below, something answered. Not a human voice. Not even a wolf's howl. A roar shook Bloodspire from foundation to tower, so immense the window cracked beside her. Garrick swore. Corvin backed toward the door, pale with terror. In the dungeon beneath the castle, the cursed wolf had heard her. The chains began to break. Garrick dragged Elara into the corridor as alarms rang. Soldiers ran past with torches. Smoke poured from the eastern stair. Bloodspire was under attack from within and without. Betrayed by the commander sworn to protect it, and opened by the Alpha who had once rejected her. As they forced her down the tower steps, Elara felt Kale's rage rising through the stone, wild and black and unstoppable. But beneath it was something worse. Fear, not for himself. For her. The knowledge struck her with terrifying force. The monster everyone feared was coming not to kill, but to save. And if she could not reach the silence inside herself before he found them, Bloodspire would drown in blood. They dragged Elara into the royal courtyard beneath a storm-torn sky, where battle had turned Bloodspire into a nightmare of fire and snow. The eastern gate stood broken, its iron teeth bent inward. Wolves clashed along the walls. Ashen Vale traders beside soldiers wearing the black and red markings of Alpha Ronan Ash, a rival warlord whose pack had long coveted Bloodspire's northern throne. At the center of the courtyard, beneath the ancient moon tower, Lord Maelor stood surrounded by council guards, his face twisted not with fear but fury that his careful control had been interrupted by someone else's ambition. Seraphine clung to his side, no longer graceful, her jeweled hairpins slipping loose in the wind. Commander Garrick shoved Elara toward a stone platform, where old execution rings had been set into the floor. Corvin followed at a distance, looking sick, but he did not stop them. That, Elara thought, was the final mercy. He had shown her exactly who he was, until no illusion remained. Alpha Ronan Ash rode through the broken gate on a white werewolf, his armor polished bone, his smile bright with conquest. He was younger than Maelor, crueler than Corvin, and far more certain of himself than either. "So this is the silent Omega," he called, looking Elara over as if appraising a weapon. The last moonless heir dragged from a servant's corner. The moon has a wicked sense of humor. Maelor's guards raised spears, but Ronan only laughed. "Stand aside, Regent. You hid a queen blood in your dungeon and expected the rest of us not to smell the shift in power. She belongs to the crown," Maelor snapped. "The crown belongs to whoever can hold the monster beneath it." Ronan dismounted and approached Elara, his alpha presence rolling before him like smoke. Every Omega in the courtyard lowered their eyes by instinct. Elara remained standing. Ronan noticed, and his smile sharpened. No scent, no submission. Beautiful. He reached for her chin. "Let us see what command your blood remembers." Before his fingers touched her, the ground split. The dungeon doors at the far end of the courtyard exploded outward in a storm of iron and stone. Kale Draven emerged through the smoke in monstrous half-shift, taller than any man should be, black fur lashing along his shoulders, claws curved like blades, eyes burning crimson. Broken chains trailed from his wrists. Soldiers fled from his path. Some dropped to their knees. Others raised weapons with shaking hands. The curse around him was no longer a hidden madness. It filled the courtyard like a living shadow, bending the flames low and turning the falling snow to ash. Yet his gaze found Elara through the chaos, and for one instant, everything else vanished. Ronan saw it. So did Maelor. So did every noble watching from the blood-slick steps. "There is the leash," Ronan said softly. Then he struck Elara across the face hard enough to send her to the stones. Kale roared, and the last human restraint inside him shattered. He lunged. Not at random, not as a mad beast. At Ronan. The rival Alpha shifted mid-leap, his white wolf massive and armored in bone plates, and the two monsters collided beneath the moon tower with a force that cracked the courtyard stones. Wolves scattered. Guards screamed. Elara pushed herself up, blood in her mouth, ears ringing, and saw the curse rising from Kale's back like black flame. The more he fought, the more it fed. The more it fed, the less of him remained. "Stop him!" Maelor shouted at her, all pretense gone. "If he loses himself, he will kill us all." Seraphine seized the moment like a blade. She caused this. The scentless witch woke the curse. Her voice carried over the courtyard. "Make her show what she is." Before Elara could move, council guards caught her arms and dragged her onto the platform. Maelor pulled a silver knife from his robe, its edge etched with old royal law. "Moonless blood answers only under witness," he said. "If you are what the mark claims, bleed beneath the open moon." Elara struggled, but the guards forced her wrist over the stone ring. Across the courtyard, Kale saw the blade. His monstrous form faltered. Ronan used the opening to tear into his side, and black blood struck the snow. Pain slammed through Elara, as if the wound had opened in her own body. The bond between them, whatever it was, flared alive. Not the torn, pleading thread she had once felt with Corvin. This was deeper, older, terrifying in its certainty. Kale staggered, still trying to reach her. Maelor cut her wrist. Silver blood, not red, fell onto the execution stone. The courtyard went silent. Even the storm seemed to stop. The blood spread in a crescent pattern, shining brighter and brighter until the platform beneath Elara's knees transformed into a circle of moonlight. The mark on her wrist opened like an eye. Every wolf in Bloodspire, ally and enemy, shifted back to human form or collapsed to the ground, their beasts forced into stillness by a command none of them had heard, but all of them obeyed. Ronan fell first, choking on his own alpha snarl. Corvin dropped to one knee. Seraphine screamed as the jewels at her throat shattered. Lord Maelor stumbled backward, horror stripping his face bare. Mother Yisra's voice rose from the edge of the courtyard, trembling and reverent. "Moonless queen." Elara stood in the circle of silver light, blood running down her fingers, and the silence inside her finally opened all the way. It was not emptiness. It was a throne. The courtyard bowed before Elara, though not by choice. That was what frightened her most. One moment she had been a rejected Omega, dragged between men who argued over how best to use her, and the next, every alpha wolf within the walls was on his knees beneath the weight of a power she had never asked to inherit. The silence poured from her like moonlight, vast and cold, pressing against every beast, until even the curse inside Kale recoiled. He stood alone in the center of the courtyard, half-shifted, bleeding, trembling, fighting not her command but the darkness wrapped around his soul. His red eyes locked on hers. She could feel the beast inside him. It was no longer only a monster. It was a wounded ancient thing, full of battlefield screams, chained years, and the unbearable memory of every life taken while Kale had been trapped behind his own eyes. Elara understood then why her absence of scent soothed him. Scent carried emotion, hunger, fear, desire, command. To his cursed wolf, every Omega sent before her had been a bell struck beside a battlefield, sweetness twisted into agony by the devouring spirit inside him. But Elara's silence gave him the one thing no healer, priest, or council spell had offered, a place where the curse could not hear itself. Maelor recovered first, because ambition always rose faster than awe. "Seize her," he ordered, though his voice shook. No one moved. His guards were still kneeling. Ronan, struggling against the invisible weight on his spine, laughed bitterly. You cannot command men whose wolves have already chosen their queen. Seraphine's face twisted with hatred. She is not a queen. She is a servant. Elara turned toward her, and Seraphine flinched as if struck. That small movement, more than any bow, revealed the reversal. For years, Seraphine had ruled rooms through beauty, bloodline, and cruelty sharpened into elegance. Now she stood powerless before the girl she had called empty. Elara could have crushed her. The knowledge came with terrifying ease. One thought, one tightening of silence, and every wolf in Seraphine's blood would fold into permanent darkness. The temptation frightened Elara, because part of her wanted it. Not justice, not law, vengeance. Then Kale's voice reached her through the storm. Elara. It was barely human, roughened by fangs and pain, but it carried no command, only plea. She looked back at him. He had dropped to one knee, not because her power forced him, but because his wound had weakened him and his restraint had cost him nearly everything. The curse writhed under his skin, black veins spreading toward his throat. If she held the entire courtyard much longer, she might stop every wolf, but she would also stop him from fighting the darkness inside himself. She stepped down from the platform. The kneeling alphas bowed lower as she passed, their bodies obeying blood memory older than law. Corvin reached for her hem, his face wet with tears he had no right to spend. Elara, I did not know. She paused, looking down at him. You knew enough to reject me where everyone could see. His hand fell away. She continued to Kale. Every step toward him loosened her hold on the others, and the courtyard began to breathe again. Maelor saw the danger. Do not go near him, he shouted. That thing will devour you. It is what he does. Elara stopped before Kale, close enough to see the man flickering behind the monster's eyes. Is that true? She asked softly. Kale's jaw tightened. I do not know what I am when it takes me. Then look at me while it tries. The black veins reached his jaw. His claws dug into the stone. I cannot ask you to be my cage. No, she said, and placed her bleeding wrist against his chest. You cannot. The silver blood touched the curse. Kale arched as if struck by lightning. The courtyard exploded in moonlight and shadow. Elara felt the devouring spirit inside him turn toward her, vast and hungry, expecting another Omega to consume. But when it reached for her scent, it found nothing. No sweetness, no fear it could twist, no submission it could poison. Only silence. Then the silence reached back. The curse screamed. Every torch in Bloodspire went out. In the darkness, Elara saw not with her eyes, but with the old blood waking inside her. She saw Kale on the battlefield 7 years before, standing beneath a red moon while a wolf-shaped darkness descended upon the armies. She saw him realize the curse would spread through every Alpha bloodline if no vessel held it. She saw him open his own soul and draw the horror in, knowing he would be remembered as a monster if he survived at all. She saw the council chain him, not because there was no cure, but because a broken king was easier to rule than a whole one. When the light returned, Elara's hand was still on Kale's chest, and the black veins had retreated. Not vanished, not cured, but forced back. Kale looked at her with a wonder so raw it hurt to hold. Then, in front of every courtier, soldier, traitor, and enemy, the dark warlord bowed his head and pressed his forehead to her bloodied hand. Not my cage, he said, voice shaking with the effort of remaining human. My choice, if you will allow it. The entire court heard him. The rejected Omega had been offered as sacrifice. Now the feared king asked for her permission. Permission did not mean peace. The moment Elara released the full weight of Moonless command, Bloodspire erupted again, because fear freed from silence often returns as violence. Ronan shifted with a snarl, though weaker now, and lunged not for Kale but for Elara, understanding that kingdoms turn around the power no one sees coming. Kale moved before thought, dragging himself between them despite the wound in his side. He met Ronan's white wolf in a clash of fang and claw, but this time, the curse did not rule him completely. Elara stood behind him with silver blood still dripping from her wrist, not controlling him, not caging him, but anchoring the edge of his madness so the man and wolf could fight as one. Around them, loyal Bloodspire soldiers rallied under the sight of their warlord standing free, while Garrick's traitors tried to force open the inner gates for Ronan's remaining army. Commander Garrick himself fought toward Maelor, not to protect him, but to seize him as a bargaining piece once the battle turned. Seraphine, seeing power slipping from every hand she had tried to hold, drew a hidden blade and went for Elara with the desperate hatred of someone who would rather destroy a miracle than live beneath it. Elara sensed her too late. The blade flashed toward her back. Corvin intercepted it. He did not do so gracefully or heroically. He stumbled into the strike as if his body had chosen before his courage could fail him, and the silver edge sank beneath his ribs. Seraphine gasped, horrified not by the blood, but by the fact that he had spent it on Elara. Corvin fell, catching Elara's sleeve with shaking fingers. "I was wrong," he breathed. It was too small a sentence for what he had done, but dying men have little room for speeches. Elara knelt, despite the battle raging around them. The old rejected bond between them flickered one last time, no longer painful, only sad, like a candle burning down in an empty room. "Yes," she said, because forgiveness would have been a lie, and cruelty would have made her too much like those who had shaped him. "You were." He closed his eyes, and the thread that had once bound them finally broke clean. Elara rose as Seraphine backed away, sobbing now, her beauty ruined by terror. "I loved him," Seraphine whispered, as though that excused every wound she had sharpened. Elara's voice came quiet, and the quiet was worse than shouting. "You loved winning." Seraphine ran, but Mother Yisra stepped from the smoke and struck her with a sleeping draught hidden in a healer's ring. "Child," the old woman said to Elara, "save the king before the rival tears out his heart." Kale and Ronan had crashed through the lower archway into the Hall of Judgment, where the black throne waited beneath the banners of dead alphas. Elara followed through smoke and falling stone. The hall that had judged her now lay broken open, its silver lamps shattered, its ancestral banners burning at the edges. Ronan drove Kale against the steps of the throne, his white wolf jaws closing around Kale's shoulder. Kale roared, half in pain, half in fury, and the curse surged again, eager to turn his defense into slaughter. Maelor stood near the dais, clutching the old crown of Bloodspire, a circlet of black iron and moonstone. Elara realized too late what he meant to do. The crown was not ceremonial. It was one of the old binding relics, made to control royal wolves through blood law. Maelor cut his palm across its inner teeth and raised it toward Kale. "By council right and royal necessity, I bind the Mad King's beast to the throne's command." The crown flared red. Kale froze. Ronan fell back, sensing another power enter the hall. Maelor smiled, blood running down his wrist. "Kneel, Kale Draven." Kale's body shook. His knees bent against his will. Elara felt his horror through the bond. Not fear of pain, but fear of losing himself again. The council had not merely chained him with silver. They had kept the relic that could enslave his wolf if his madness ever became politically useful. The betrayal was older and deeper than she had known. Ronan shifted back to human form, laughing breathlessly. "Well played, Regent. Will you bind the queen, blood too?" Maelor's gaze snapped to Elara. "If necessary." The crown turned in his hand, its red light reaching for her mark. Pain sliced through her wrist. The old blood inside her recoiled, then rose in answer. Mother Yisra's warning returned. Some silences are commands. Elara understood at last that she had spent her life believing she had no voice because her true power did not need sound. She stepped into the center of the hall. "Kyle," she said softly. His head lifted with visible effort. Red light from the crown dragged at his spine, forcing him down inch by inch. "Do you choose him?" she asked. Maelor laughed. "He has no choice." Elara did not look away from Kyle. "Do you choose him?" Kale's face contorted as man, wolf, and curse fought beneath his skin. Blood ran from his nose. His claws cracked the floor. Then his eyes, silver gray beneath the red, fixed on hers. No. The word was barely spoken, but it was enough. Elara turned her bleeding wrist outward, letting her silver blood fall onto the hallstones where generations of alphas had sworn obedience to the crown. "Then hear me," she whispered, and the whisper filled the room like a bell made of winter light. The moonless command opened, not over every wolf, not over every beast, but over the false bond between crown and king. Silence struck the relic. The red light shattered. Maelor screamed as the crown split in his hands, black iron breaking into fragments that cut his palms to bone. Kale rose, not as a cursed prisoner, not as a monster. As the warlord who had chosen pain to save his people and had been repaid with chains, Ronan lunged for the broken crown fragments, but Kale met him halfway. The fight ended not with frenzy but judgment. Kale drove Ronan to the floor, claws at his throat, and for one dangerous breath, the curse begged him to tear, to kill, to feed. Elara stepped closer. She did not command him. She simply stood there, the silence he could choose. Kale's hand shook. Then he pulled back. "Take him alive," he ordered his soldiers, voice rough but clear. The loyal guards surged forward, binding Ronan in silver. Maelor tried to flee through the side passage, but the council elders, seeing the throne turn, blocked his path. Garrick was dragged in moments later, wounded and cursing, betrayed by the same soldiers he had tried to sell. Bloodspire's hall filled with smoke, snow, and kneeling men. Kale climbed the dais slowly and stood before the black throne without sitting. His gaze moved over the court, then came to rest on Elara. "The throne owes you more than apology," he said. Elara looked at the broken crown, the burned banners, the blood on the stones, and the man who had nearly been made a weapon again. Then, let it begin with truth. Truth, once demanded publicly, became harder for the court to bury. By dawn, Bloodspire's bells rang not for mourning, but for reckoning. Lord Maelor was stripped of regency and confined in the same tower where he had imprisoned Elara, his hands bandaged, his influence bleeding away faster than his wounds. Commander Garrick was placed in chains before the soldiers he had betrayed. Alpha Ronan Ash was held under silver guard until the northern packs could witness his crimes, and Ashenvale's banners were torn from the eastern gate. Seraphine woke in a locked chamber, without jewels, titles, or anyone left to fear her beauty. Corvin was carried to the healer's wing, still alive by the thin mercy of Mother Yizra's skill, though whether he would survive, the wound remained uncertain. Elara did not ask to see him. Some endings did not require an audience. The court expected Kale to claim her at once. They expected the old laws to rise like hungry dogs, to declare that a moonless heir belonged beside a royal alpha, that the bond between them should be sealed before fear turned into rebellion. Even Mother Yizra, kind as she was, warned Elara that power left undefined invited knives. But Kale did not summon her to the throne room. He came to the lower garden instead, the only place in Bloodspire where snow softened around black winter roses and the mountain wind carried a clean edge of pine. He wore no crown. The scars at his wrists were uncovered. He looked exhausted, but not broken, and for the first time since she had met him, no chains followed the sound of his steps. Elara stood beneath a leafless moon tree, her bandaged wrist tucked against her cloak. For a while, neither spoke. The silence between them had changed. It was no longer the absence that saved him. It was space, freely given. Finally, Kale said, "They will tell you that the kingdom needs you." Elara watched a black rose tremble under melting frost. Does it? Yes. He did not soften the truth, and she respected him more for that. "My curse is not gone. The throne is unstable. The packs have seen your blood awaken. Some will worship you. Some will hunt you. Some will try to own you in gentler language than Maelor used." She looked at him then. "And you?" Kale's jaw tightened, as though the answer mattered enough to wound him if spoken poorly. "I need you," he said. "But need is not a claim. I will not build another cage and call it protection. The words entered her slowly, finding the deepest fear Corvin had named, and Kale had refused to become. Elara wanted to believe them. She also knew belief was not a door one walked through simply because someone opened it. When your wolf rises again, she asked, I will fight it. And if my presence is the only thing that keeps you human? Pain crossed his face, but he did not look away. Then I will ask, each time. And if one day you say no, I will bear the answer. That was the moment Elara understood why the bond between them had never felt like the one Corvin broke. Corvin's bond had pulled at her like hunger disguised as fate, demanding she become smaller so he could remain unchallenged. Kale's bond stood before her like a dangerous road through winter mountains, offering no safety except honesty, no promise except choice. Her hidden blood stirred beneath her bandage, not commanding now, but recognizing. I spent my life being told I was empty, she said. Then I learned I was sealed. Then everyone decided that meant I belonged to history, to prophecy, to the throne, to you. She stepped closer, close enough to see the silver in his eyes shift. I belong to myself first. Kale bowed his head. Yes. One word, no argument, no hesitation. It loosened something in her chest that humiliation, fear, and survival had kept bound for years. Snow began to fall again, soft and soundless, gathering in his dark hair and on the shoulders of her cloak. Elara lifted her hand, the bandaged wrist between them. If I stay, it will not be because your wolf knelt. Kale's voice lowered. Why then? She thought of the dungeon, the courtyard, the broken crown, the way he had asked instead of taken, the way he had chosen mercy when the curse begged for blood. She thought of the girl she had been in Ashen Vale, standing alone while an alpha rejected her in front of everyone, believing the world had ended because one weak man could not bear the truth of her. She thought of the silence inside her, once mistaken for absence, now vast enough to humble kings. Because the first time everyone called me nothing, she said, you looked at me as if nothing had finally become the only thing that could save you. Kale's breath caught, not dramatically, but like a man struck in a place armor could not cover. Slowly, giving her every chance to refuse, he reached for her hand. Elara let him take it. The moment their fingers touched, the mate bond awakened fully, not as a chain snapping shut, but as a door opening inward. Kale's wolf stirred beneath his skin, immense and scarred, but it did not rage. It pressed its great head against the silence of her spirit and rested. Elara felt, somewhere deep in her own blood, not the sudden arrival of a wolf she had been denied, but the rising of something older, a moonless guardian, pale-eyed and quiet, standing at the edge of her soul. She was not wolfless. She had never been wolfless. Her beast had simply been waiting for a world quiet enough to hear it. Kale sank to one knee before her in the snow, not because magic forced him, not because the court watched, but because reverence had its own language. Elara Vane, he said. Moonless air, breaker of the false crown, silence in my storm. I will not ask you to be my leash. I will not ask you to be my cure. I ask only whether you will walk beside me while I become worthy of the life you return to me. Elara looked down at the feared warlord of Bloodspire, the man beneath the monster, the king who had learned that needing someone did not grant the right to possess her. Then she touched his face, as she had in the dungeon, when the beast first knelt and the world first changed. Stand, Kale Draven, she whispered. If I am to walk beside you, I will not have you beneath me. He rose, and when he did, the first light of dawn broke over Bloodspire's black towers. From the walls, wolves began to howl, not in frenzy, not in fear, but in recognition. The sound rolled across the mountains, carrying news the northern kingdoms would spend years trying to understand. The cursed warlord had returned, the rejected Omega had awakened, and the silence they had mistaken for weakness had become the power before which monsters knelt. Elara knew the world beyond the garden would not be gentle. There would be tribunals, rival packs, old bloodlines crawling from hidden places, and nights when Kale's curse returned with teeth bared. There would be days when her own power frightened her, when courts tried to dress possession as duty, when the shadow of Ashen Vale reached for her in dreams. But for the first time, the path ahead belonged to her choice. Kale's hand remained around hers, warm despite the snow. The bond between them pulsed once, deep and steady, not demanding surrender but offering recognition. In that quiet, Elara finally understood the truth the moon had hidden in her from birth. She had not been sent to Bloodspire to become the warlord's cage. She had come to break every cage that had ever held them both.